All right, I'm going to introduce us. Let's do this thing. Here we go.
Barbie smiles on.
That's the perfect way to start a whole video. We're having a three-way biz buddy, biz bestie chat because, and this has been much delayed for us. We have been really, really wanting to do this for a while. I'm super excited for it though, because the three of us have a lot of offline conversation. And this topic has needed to be given some vocal voice out in the world. I'm just going to kind of tee us up here. We three have shown up in each other's world. So if people don't know, information will be in the show notes and they should really go look at that. And we are going to talk about the changing landscape for our entrepreneurial community because people are having a moment.
That puts it kind of.
Put it lightly, yes.
People are having a moment. Rachel, you wrote this amazing article where you talked about the internet apocalypse, and you're like, "This is like my sixth internet apocalypse."
Yeah.
Like, we were all like, "Yeah." So, I don't know. Where do we want to start with this? Like, do we just want to commiserate for a minute and be like, "What the hell is going on?"
Well, let's do some scene setting because I know like we talk about this offline a lot, but like when we say internet apocalypse, just in case anybody has been lucky enough to escape the reality that is this year, what we're talking about is we all went into 2023, seems like, expecting that like, I don't know, maybe things are going to kind of like even out and be chill for about half a second. And then that very much did not happen. And for me, and I think for a lot of other people I've talked to, Q1 was kind of like shaky, but not undoable. It was like, okay, it's a little weird, but like, whatever, maybe it's just a hiccup. And then like Q2 ranging into Q3 was just like, what has happened? Like, I know a lot of people who actually close their businesses. Suddenly their side gig becomes their main gig. And then there's a couple of like a few outliers who are having their best business year ever, which has been an interesting thing to me as well. But sorry, I was looking at the little thing popped up that said squad shot will be taken in 5 seconds. Cool. Sorry to ruin the magic, Mary.
Sorry, I'm testing things and I'm trying to figure out what's going on.
And this is why we're biz besties, because we're like just rolling with it. It's
exactly.
all good.
Right. Come be on my YouTube channel while I completely derail you. Also, I'm not sure if my camera's like properly picking up. It appears to be, but it keeps giving me these warnings. So we're just gonna have.
Well, that's the reality.
So Rachel, you were saying.
Oh yeah, no, I think this is actually perfect though, because something that I've pulled out of this whole entire year is a lot of what we've been experiencing happened quietly, and it happened to people like sort of secretly. So the way that it happened in my business, and then I was talking to a bunch of people and I had a bunch of clients be like, I think maybe something's wrong with my business, but I'm the only one. And I was like, oh yeah, I've talked to like 50 people who have said the same thing. So that's why I wanted to kind of bring this to a wider audience. And that's why I think it's important that we're having these conversations and just having them like, out in the open, trying stuff out, seeing what happens. Because the more that we try to put on our little perfect Barbie smile facades to have these conversations, then it's going to be like 3 years down the road before we ever feel comfortable enough to talk about it. And I'm like, no, things are messy right now. And I think it's worth talking about out loud.
I love that. And I want to jump in and also share for those who are watching, like why we have the perspective we have. Because I think sometimes people are like, well, how do you know that? And I don't know that. Like, are you famous? Because I don't see you as an Insta celebrity. So like, what's going on? But it's the nature of the work that we do. We're all service providers, but it's also the type of service provider we are. We're not IT specialists around here. So Rachel, with you being a copywriter, you're oftentimes working on a business 6 months to a year before they're trying to do a thing. And so the clients you pick up today are going to benefit from your sort of after like analysis of the work you did a year
Yeah.
ago. Because you can be like, okay, we just had 6 launches, and let me tell you what happened to
Yes.
them. We thought all of this stuff, and now here's what we're seeing. And the people you work with now, we won't know until next year if the gut instinct was correct. For me, doing online communities, it's funny is because people are like, oh, you just run Facebook groups. Can you make money at that? And I first always go, hey, it's more than Facebook groups, people, okay? I'm platform neutral. And then I say, yes. And by virtue of being in charge of somebody's community, I end up deep under the hood of their business. I see all the cracks. I see all the things that they never thought of because I see it all as potential crisis, right? Like, okay, your community is a house of cards and it's going to crash down. So I have that perspective in real time. And as somebody who runs communities, I see how humans behave online in various ecosystems where they're super comfortable and they don't think anybody's paying any attention. And then Mary, you work in systems, but you also still work as a coach in high level programs. So you're talking to CEOs in an environment where they have no choice but to be honest. They cannot afford to have the Barbie smile. They're paying, first of all, they're paying way too much to get their business improved in order to lie or put on some kind of facade. And two, you're just good and you have this like black light thing on your head that says confide
Yeah.
in me. And so we all tell you our deepest, darkest secrets. It's
This
just
is
how
true.
it works around
Can
here.
confirm.
It does happen. There's a confessional in my world.
So,
People do. They like come and they're like, "Can I tell you something?" And I'm like, "Did you know you're not the only one?" Yeah. I love that there's sort of this like triangle of perspective. Which was why when, Tonya, you and I have our offline conversations, and Rachel, you and I have our offline conversations, and all three of us, like, we all just sort of like talk. And then Rachel, you published that article, and I was just like, thank you for putting public words on this thing, because this is a very real thing that's happening. And so many people don't realize that A, they're not alone, and B, it's like, it's not about you. It's not about you, and it's not of you. It's like, but you do need to learn how to exist in the world. And if anything, I think it's a great pattern interrupt, weirdly enough, as uncomfortable as it is for the entrepreneurial community, because like the ways we used to do things, they don't work anymore. And people are like, we are people. We need to learn how to people better. And I've been channeling this through like the woo woo side of Sensible Woo all year long. And I'm like, so proud and happy of the people who have latched onto that. And they're like, I'm going to figure out how to be more human online, however that means for them. For some of them, it's in their marketing activities. For some of them, it's in the way they offer things to their clients. But there are so many people who still are like, let me try and bypass that in some way, shape, or form. And I'm like, it doesn't friggin' work. Like, you're human and they're human, and you have a disconnect. People are like, how come they're not listening to me? I'm like, well, have you looked at your humanity lately? Like, it's
Yeah.
Friday and I'm having tech problems today. I'm like,
No.
out because I'm married to a teacher of middle schoolers. It is Friday the 13th.
it is Friday. Actually, I usually find Friday the 13th to be really good days.
I'm When you work at a middle school, it's like where you go, oh, that's what's going on. And Brian always says, he's like, I'm not typically like that person, but honestly, it's the only explanation for what we've got going on over here this week.
This week has been particularly interesting. And then we also have a giant solar eclipse
Oh,
tomorrow.
yeah, tomorrow.
In Libra, and there's a whole lot of personal reckoning happening with a lot of folks. So I think people are feeling it, and I don't know that everybody has words for what they're feeling, which is a big part of where I come from as a coach. But I think that when we see articles like yours, Rachel, or people hear conversations like we put out publicly, Tonya, I think we do our best to help. But then there's the part where like you have to show up and do the work yourself in your business, in your life, to continue finding more of the articulation that you need. And I'm just wondering, like, because we've all ridden through multiple cycles in business and we've seen things come and go before, and everyone's still alive. Nobody went to the hospital, nobody died, nobody got arrested, and so we're
Yeah.
good. But other people who haven't had as much of that, like, I can totally see who doesn't have as much experience right
Mhm.
now. It doesn't matter how much money they're making, it doesn't matter how big their audience is. I can tell what level they actually are in business by how they're handling this right now. And if they're like, "Well, I'm just gonna double down and hang on to the thing that I know," I'm like, "Oh, you're still green, you're still young,
Mhm.
like, give it a moment."
I I
Yeah.
see a lot of that. I also see a lot of, this kind of desperate searching for the thing that's gonna fix it, of like, "Well, this isn't working,
Yes.
so I'm gonna try this. Well, that didn't work, so I'm gonna try this." And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, but what do you actually need? Do you know?" You probably don't if
Yeah.
you're jumping from thing to thing to thing to thing, and that's just a really good way to spend a whole lot of money, like, not getting results.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So we have to talk about that because I think, I think this is kind of an always problem in online business, but when we are in periods of quick, easy money, like we all were in 2020, I don't know about you all, but my business
Yeah.
tripled in 2020 because everybody went from, you can make money at that to teach me your ways, right? Like suddenly, those of us who work online were completely validated by everybody around the globe. So they were like, okay, so just do more of what works. Well, now what we have is people, it's like it's not working because they're relatively new. Many are coming in from 2020 and beyond. They are under this impression, well, it's not working, right? They don't understand the cycle. They don't understand how much time. I had this conversation with a client this week who, it's funny, they were frustrated and they were just like, well, I just don't feel like we have anything solid. And I said, yeah, I get that. And also, you have discussed pivoting your message and pivoting your main product 4 times since January. So, we want to talk messaging, which I totally get. And, this is a person who has been around, but has really been in the riches are in the
Mm.
niches sort of environment. And so in their mind, like they haven't found the right niche, they haven't niched down enough, all of that stuff. Fine, maybe true. And I'm like, okay, but you make a decision. We start a plan. I get far enough to craft a strategy. And then there's a conference, there's a workshop, there's a new book on the market, there's some LinkedIn article. And now we want to do a 180. Sometimes it's just a 90-degree turn, but a lot of times it's a complete 180. And then it's like, okay, now I need a strategy for that. I'm like, I have spent all year creating strategies that have gotten to the I don't know, I don't actually know football, but you know that line before the goalpost? They get to that line.
Tonya, I love you so much right now.
And then it's like back to the middle thing with the quarterback and the lines. So
Yep.
obviously you guys know
I don't know.
football. I'm
I
like,
have no idea. I know exactly what lines you're talking about, but I don't know what they're called.
clients frustrated because they're like, I'm spending all this money on marketing and community and all of this, and I'm getting nowhere. And I'm like, I am spending all this time and energy trying to take you somewhere. But you just decide before we leave that instead of going to the Hamptons, suddenly we're going to the North Pole and I've got to repack our suitcases
Yeah.
and I'm tired. So I think, Rachel, with what you're saying, I feel like people don't realize how long some cycles
Mhm.
are. People quite honestly do not know what strategy
Yeah.
is. And, we all three can go all day
Yeah.
long mixing up strategies and tactics. And so they jump ship way too early. I think right now it's super easy pickings for the course creators that sell the one size fits all
Mhm.
solution because, like you said, Rachel, everybody is looking for the quick fix. Oh, okay, it's an online course. Oh, all right, well, that kept me busy for 6 months, but that didn't work. It's a membership. Oh, it's not a membership. Okay, I'm going to do digital
Yeah.
products. Oh, I'm going to do VIP days. Oh, I'm going to do this. Oh, I'm going to do that. And I don't know about you all, but I get whiplash just watching them spin.
It's
Mhm.
desperation. Like, watching people be desperate and then get taken advantage of
Mhm.
desperately kills me. And, I'm seeing some of, like, the snake oil salesmen of the days of old, they have definitely lost their footing, and it's kind of painful watching some of that go down, because that's just painful for to watch any of it ever happen to somebody. But it's like, take it as like a lesson learned, like watch the market. And yeah, well, I mean, you guys know how I feel about it, and I know you agree, but I just feel like this is where things like good basic business basics come into play, and if somebody has them or not. And, if somebody does have good business foundation, they have some numbers that they know about their business. But people who don't know why they're making decisions and nothing's databased, they're just like, oh, they're doing the jumping ship thing. Let me try this. Let me try that. Oh, I had another idea. It's like, you can have, I love generating ideas too. You can have a million ideas, but like in times like this, you've got to look at like what is truly working and what is working in terms of like people's actual behaviors. Like you can track people's behaviors in your business. But now we get to the clincher part, which is where we discover how many people haven't really been doing a whole lot in their businesses because they don't have a whole lot of data to pull from. And like that's a very painful personal moment to realize if you discover you're in that situation. I think it just highlights how much, like, as individuals, like, you are so responsible as a CEO for the growth of things. It is not magic, and it requires consistency, and it requires time, and the things you cannot out gamify in a human experience. This is for all my metaphysical people who are like, time is a construct. And I'm like, theoretically, I agree with you, but we are living in these human flesh suits right now, and we work on time. Okay. And it's like, so you can't out gamify linear time, and you can't out gamify your lack of consistency. And like, I know getting in shape is not everybody's goal, but because I've been dealing with my health over this whole year, like relearning consistency in my life for a health goal has been illuminating for me in business. And I think if you take that analogy and you look at it for business, so many people, they're like, in the fourth quarter of the year now, and they're like, let me hit the gym, I'm gonna get the bikini body now. And it's like, dude, you missed 9 months of the year. Like, start today, start over the clock now, and then move forward. But some of these programs will sell these quick things, and I'm just so curious what happens during Black Friday
Oh
sales this
gosh,
year.
yeah.
How much are we going to get sold the magic formula that's going to fix you before the year starts? And I'm like, oh, I don't know how I feel about it.
Well, I think I'm so glad you brought that up because the other buzzword that I'm seeing everywhere, because of course, is automation. AI is going to fix it for me,
Oh,
like automate it. And I saw an incredible post on LinkedIn yesterday, and the quote I pulled out of it was, "Automating a bad process doesn't make it a good process." And I'm like, oh,
Ooh,
oh yeah, because we're seeing so much of that where people are like, well, I don't really know what I'm doing, but things aren't working. AI says it's magic. So like maybe if I try the magic, then it's going to work and then my business will be automated and then the internet will be my ATM. And I'm like, it's not, it just won't. Like it's just not going to happen.
that is so not going to
Mhm.
happen.
yeah. Well, and like, I can sometimes I'm a wet blanket. I know you guys are very shocked by that, but I occasionally do have to inject some reality into people's daydreaming. And I had, so Chat GPT 3, right? So pre 4, prepaid plan, all of that stuff. I had a client who had to create a marketing strategy for a launch this year. And so it's going to create their whole strategy, so they didn't need me to do that. So, right. So part of this is negotiating pay. I don't need you to do the strategy piece. So, we can just do it for half your normal rate. Right. And I had to say, so you realize that ChatGPT's knowledge stopped at 2018. So in ChatGPT's world, we don't even have a pandemic yet. So explain to me how that strategy, and I'm not saying it's a bad strategy, haven't looked at it, but how is that strategy going to get you to a launch in a post-pandemic society where people bled through stimulus money thinking they were going to, work their way into a seven-figure business and have nothing to show for it? I'm just curious,
No.
like I'm happy to be wrong here.
This we need to talk about that especially, because I think that's another thing that people, another sort of hidden factor that people aren't realizing, and I think it informs what we're seeing as a whole, is that we're on this sort of like downslide of a 2-year bubble where a whole bunch of people came in 2020 because they're like, well, my job sucks and I'm home anyway, so like let me make money on the internet. And now we're at this point, which happens in every single business, where you're 2 years in and you're like, wait, this doesn't get less hard. I'm like, no, it just gets different hard over and over and over and over again.
Mhm.
And so yeah, and just not acknowledging like where this is and what we're seeing in the cohort, people are kneecapping themselves without even realizing it, because they're coming in without context with a lot of big promises and thinking something should work because they've been told it will, when that's just not the story.
Well, can we also talk about that where they learned this should work, but then
Yeah.
it doesn't, comes from a creator who had a completely different set of ingredients in the kitchen in different, environmental constraints and benefits. And you can't recreate that time period. Last time I checked, we don't have magical time machines. This is not Back to the Future. So we can't just like punch in the date and like you're here now in this moment, and you can take evidence of things that have happened previously and try to apply them, and then strategize and like do the work of figuring out what will work today. But like the world is changing and moving very, very quickly, and there are all kinds of things that you won't expect will happen. I mean, the pandemic is such a great example of that. And like I still hear from some people that they're tired of hearing about, like, I'm tired about talking about the pandemic. And I'm like, if you're tired about talking about the pandemic, you need to go back to a W 2 job, because that pandemic taught us so much
Yeah.
evidence that we need for building business. And, you know, there are just certain things that we have to acknowledge have changed in the world, and we haven't yet fully unpacked all of it. So we do have to continue analyzing it. And I just don't think that the things that people are selling, it's the way they're packaged up and the way they're selling it, like follow my formula and come to the land of riches. And it's like, that doesn't work. I will buy somebody's templates or formula or process to learn how to apply it to my situation
Mhm.
today. And if they frame it like that, I'm like, you are somebody I will work with. But if you try to sell it to me like a snake oil salesman, like, this will cure all your problems. All you need is this, pack of templates. And I'm like,
Mhm.
no, no, like that doesn't solve my problem. But that's where you can tell when, somebody, it doesn't have as much long-term experience as, other people who've ridden through it multiple times, because there is this desperation of like, oh shit, the market is changing right now and I've not seen it before and I don't know how to handle
Mhm.
that. And it's a very emotional process. Like, I think we forget how much emotions are flowing right now. We were talking about astrology before we hit record, and like, you could take that alone as a
Yeah.
thing. And then put on top, geopolitics and sociocultural problems and your family issues and all the things. And like, it's a little cesspool of emotions right there. And then now you're going to make business decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Rachel, you had said something offline about how you've seen, because we're talking about how this is affecting a lot of people who are new in
Mhm.
business. But you actually have some pretty interesting insight, I think, that I want to hear more about on some of the folks who are more seasoned and what they're doing that I think we all agree maybe is not the smartest move ever either.
Yeah. So it's been strange. So, like I said, a lot of my clients earlier in the year, they were, maybe they'd been newer, or maybe they had been, like you said, working off stimulus money, and then it's not there anymore. And like, what happens? So, like, we kind of had like the bottom fall out of that cohort of the business, and things sort of, kind of started picking back up in my world around like the beginning of August. So I started getting some like whispers, right? Things started moving again. So I don't know if that's just that segment of the market stabilizing or what. But then I had a whole nother wave come in of more established people, normally coaches, which like coaches are always the canary in the coal mine. Whatever happens to them happens first, and then we can see it's going to like go out to other people. But they were established 7-figure businesses, multiple successful launches, multiple successful books, and they're trying to launch a program or something because it's fall, so it's launch season, and they're like, dude, all of my launches are falling completely flat. What's happening?
Mhm.
And so they're different, like they're experiencing the same thing, but they're different from the initial cohort in that they still have, they've got more of an established base. They can take more of a punch as a business. And so now they're coming to me and spending in ways they have not previously spent because they're like, I want to buy my way out of this. Like, I don't like this. It's uncomfortable. Like, tell me what to do. Tell me how to tweak my launch funnel. Tell me how to tweak my sales pages so that I can make this keep working the way it did. And then I have to be the wet blanket sad trombone. And I'm like, it's not going to work the way it did. But the good news is you have the money, you have the stability, you have the experience that we can figure something else out. And then it gets into a conversation of like, oh man, I got to come up with another strategy. Okay. So it's
Yeah.
tiring. Like they're just tired.
People are very tired. I've seen a lot of seasoned entrepreneurs bounce out of the space. They're getting some pretty plush offers for like executive level roles. And I know, we all know, in 2 to 5 years, you can come back to entrepreneurship because once you've been an entrepreneur and you have the freedom and you love it, you just really don't want to give that up. But for some of them, there's one in particular that I knew this year, and she has children who are hitting that sort of like high school age. And she's like, yeah, I can tolerate that for like about 3 to 4 years and like get through the high school time, get them off to college. And then like now they're out of the house and I'm going to come back to my thing. And, they're making same amount of money or
Mhm.
more. And business was doing fine. They just didn't want to solve problems anymore for a while. Like, let some other employer solve the problem for me. I mean, that's no guarantee because other businesses fold all the time too. But I get it. Like I get the tiredness, and I think that our more seasoned folks, like we can look to them and see how they're emotionally handling things. You'll notice that there's like a calmness to them where they're just like, I'm going to make a calculated decision in this moment. It's a very CEO thing to do. It's not the chicken little, oh shit, the sky is falling. Let me go do something kind of reaction. Um, and I've seen people who for whatever reason grew large followings during COVID. They just were really good at like their social game or
Mhm.
whatever. And they're just kind of like, oh my God, oh my God. And I'm like, give it a minute.
Yeah.
Like keep solving problems. You'll be fine. But sometimes too, like the things that you banked on as being a strength, like they're not meant to be a strength moving
Mhm.
forward. I think that's
Mhm.
the harder one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that Rachel has said, I think it's on Instagram, right, where entrepreneurship is like the only thing or the only line of work or something where nothing is your fault, but everything's your
Yeah.
responsibility,
Yeah. Almost nothing is
Yeah.
your
right?
fault and almost everything is your problem. And like that's the
Exactly.
job over and over again every single day. And like
Hmm.
that
And
can, oh, sorry, go ahead, Tanya.
no, go
I was
ahead.
just say that like for
Finish your
me,
thought.
that's wildly rewarding because like I enjoy solving problems
Mm.
and for other people that's a nightmare. And so I think knowing where you get your dopamine, like where you feel successful, what kind of conditions you need, like the level of challenge you want in your day to day is so important. And I think that's what we're seeing with both cohorts, frankly, of like, do you have the endurance to keep doing this if you are a more established in the more established cohort? And if you're in the newer one, if I explain to you that what's happening right now is going to keep happening in about like 4-ish year increments,
Yeah.
as long as you're doing this forever and it's never going to change, like, do you look at that and you're like, cool, let me figure this out? Or do you look at that and you're like, I really want a paycheck? You need to
Yeah.
be doing something else, and that's fine. Like it's just a different thing you want.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think about kind of thinking also with what Mary was saying, because I know a lot of people who are taking executive
Mhm.
roles right now, right? They're backburnering their business, taking executive roles. And I think back to, the start of my business. So I started my business in June of 2007 ish. And I was, it was a side hustle like most of us. And then in 2010, I had Lily, and I decided, you know what? I was looking around and I saw like the housing bubble had burst. And what I saw is companies were laying off like large numbers of people. Brian had been one of 250 some teachers in the county that had been laid off. They hadn't done layoffs in the county for like 2 decades. Like all this stuff was happening. And then I saw that people were hiring consultants to the tune of like $250 an hour, right? Because there was none of the extra overhead. There's not the unemployment taxes, there's not the benefits and all these things. So I was like, okay, I have a new baby. Where I was working at the time, they were doing like massive wage cuts trying to avoid layoffs. And I thought, I'm just going to hang my hat as a consultant. I bet on, 10, 20 hours a week, I can make the same amount of money. It's going to be fine. And so I did that for a while. And then by the time Lily was 3, I remember sitting like, had her in my arms, and it was like 9 o'clock at night. And I'm trying to like be present in the moment with my sweet toddler. And all I can think about is all the emails I need to send, right? Because I've wrapped up contracts and I need a new batch of contracts. I don't have anybody in the pipeline. And I'm like, I'm not enjoying this. And when I went back, so I decided, okay, I'm going to go get a regular job. And I would say, like, I just want to make widgets for a while. I just want to make widgets. I don't want to worry about lead gen. I don't want to worry about marketing. I don't want to worry about my messaging. I don't want to do the customer service thing. I just want to make widgets. And I took the absolute worst job ever. Like my job at a very high level was I did Control C and Control V for 8 hours a day for 18 months straight. It was, I got put on a website migration project, 260 some websites, and the old platform it was on had no automation. No automations integrated with it because it was so old. So they had to be manually copied and pasted into the new platform. That was my job. So I got my wish. I mean, I wasn't actually making widgets, although I did develop some serious cramping in my joints. And I got to work from home. That was the other thing. But I had like a regular paycheck. I think it was like something along the lines of maybe 55,000 a year or whatever, right? But it was fine. And 7 years later, and I had my business kind of on the back burner. I would do 1 to 2 clients at any given time. But like 7 years later, I'm like, okay, on one hand, I get paid the same amount whether I stare at the wall and blink slowly or I actually solve problems here. Right?
Yeah.
And guess what? I get the same amount of recognition whether I stare blankly at the wall and blink slowly or I solve the world's problems here. And so then I exited and came back to full-time entrepreneurship. But when I'm hearing the whole Chicken Little stuff and the sky is falling, I go back to, all right, well, what do the LinkedIn job ads say? Are people hiring employees right now? Because if people are hiring employees right now, the bubble has not burst.
No. And LinkedIn
Right?
is
The pendulum
hot
swung.
right now.
Like,
Oh yeah,
really
you
hot.
can get a community management gig, like an actual community management gig, not like shiny like new title on a community like customer service role, but like a real community manager gig for about 75K a year.
Yeah.
You could throw out 20 to 50 resumes a week on that.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, LinkedIn is super hot.
Same for CMO stuff. And what's been interesting, because I've been watching that as well, because I was like, I don't know, earlier this year, I was like, I don't know, do I want to go back to that? Like, do I want to do this thing and apply for CMO work? And at first I would like kind of put out feelers, kind of meet with people, and I would see companies who are like, entrepreneur, like you clearly don't know what you're doing. You don't have the seriousness to work for our company. And then it shifted about mid-year where they were like, oh, wait, you've got like 15 years of C-level experience? Like, oh. And so then I've started seeing people like approach. So it is fascinating to watch that shift. And I love how we're like setting this up. So we've got cohort 1 shift, cohort 2 shift, and the corporate shift as the perception of entrepreneurs change. And I know it is those beautiful trailblazers who went before me and got those C-level suites. And then people are like, oh, wait, entrepreneurs don't just totally like screw off all the time. Like we can actually do things. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I've had a personal prediction, and I feel like it kicked off during COVID. I don't think we're going to see it for probably another decade out, see like actual like volume of this, but I think there was a breaking of the old sort of job corporate
Yeah.
structure, and not that entrepreneurs haven't existed already, right, but there was something that shifted it into a more mainstream thing, because for the longest time we were the weirdos who worked from home, and people were like, how the heck are you doing
Yeah.
that, and then all of a sudden everybody had to work from home, and I think like that was the first real big fissure in the whole ground
Mm-hmm.
level. And the way that corporate employees are very resistant to going back into an office right now tells me more than I need to know. And I think there's going to be a very I actually think that there's going to be another wave coming pretty quick. I think by this time next year we're going to see a whole fresh wave of brand new baby entrepreneurs, and the people who are willing to solve the problems for sticking around past year two, and they're going to be like, oh, I know something at this point, like maybe I'll do something. And maybe there's still side hustling, maybe there's still a day job involved, whatever. Like it's not like just one, it's not just entrepreneurship or just this. Like I think the whole idea of the gig economy is actually a lot more complex, and that people are going to have sort of this puzzle piece of things that we do. I mean, we all do consulting, we do other things in addition to our businesses. And so I think there's going to be a whole new crop of people who are going to be like ready to do the work. And the stuff, the way our existing entrepreneurial community was built, I really feel like it's going to the breakage that has to happen is necessary, because the foundation that we built this on doesn't serve everybody anymore. So like we have to rebuild the new way of doing things. Like we're a lot more, sensitive and aware. We have more emotional language now. The dude bro thing is done. It's
Yeah.
done. And there's just too many new diverse voices coming into the space where it's like that kind of stuff's just not going to hold up. And so we're just in that messy middle period, and
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm here for it.
Yeah. No, I think it's fascinating for me to watch, and I know we've talked about this as well, but it's fascinating for me to watch these really like legacy brands, like legacy entrepreneur brands, try and navigate this. And some are like here for it, and then some are just really falling over their feet, and you're just like, oh, wow. Like, when's the last time you talked to someone? Like, you can't just keep
Yeah.
putting out the same structure over and over and over again. And I think this is actually why we've seen several like very big known, whatever, well known, big people have very public humiliations really in the past couple of years, because they'll do something and everybody's like, hey, that's incredibly tone deaf, or like, we don't talk like that anymore. Or are you seriously using black bodies to sell your product? Like, what? And it's been amazing to see the response to that, where some people are like, I would never, and then other people are like, oh yeah, well I really screwed up. Sorry. Like that was dumb. Let me learn.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been, I do a extensive amount of market research because the librarian in me just can't
Right.
help herself. And I keep track of what people do online, and they're not all big names. I think some of them would like to think that they're big names, but they're not all big names. And there was one that every now and then I'll kind of dip in and just see like, what is the latest happening with her? She went incredibly tone deaf during Black Lives Matter. It was not okay. She's a white woman. And then she switched immediately into queer baiting. And I've noticed that something must have happened, because her branding is like changed, and like all the stuff that was up has clearly been archived, and like she has and I think when you're not like a celebrity entrepreneur, you have some grace in there to rebrand yourself and correct the archive of your materials. Um, but it's inevitable that like something's going to go a little wrong, or like you're a little late to catch up to the party, and like shit happens, but how you handle it matters. And I think there are people right now who aren't sure how to navigate the
Mhm.
space, and so they're just like, well, let me double down on what I think is a safe thing, which is like the old thing, which is the thing that's not working. And then now you sound real tone deaf, because now you just sound like a dude
Yeah.
bro, and it's not working.
So what I'm pulling out of that, and this is like coming out of my brain as I say it, is I think we're seeing the fallout of some people who got into entrepreneurship and then tried to recreate essentially a corporate structure for themselves, but one where they're the boss, versus people who
Yeah.
are working in this in a, I would say, I don't know, truly entrepreneurial manner, where we're like, this is flexible, it's agile, it changes fast, and there's no, like, the structure is the structure I give it, and as soon as that stops being useful to me, I'm going to do something else.
Exactly. And what I would add to that, not only recreating the corporate structure, but I'm going to say toxic, some other people might just say unhealthy corporate definitions of success, commitment, loyalty. Like they brought all of that with them, and they just, they wanted all the freedom and flexibility of entrepreneurship, but they didn't allow themselves to enjoy any of it because they were still operating under a measure of success according to a corporate standard.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. I'm watching the clock and listen, I think we need part 2.
I think we definitely do.
And 3 and 4 and
And
5.
4, and
Oh
we'll just
wait,
keep
maybe
going.
I should just like call you guys or something.
Or we can just do a series. I like the idea of a series.
I think we should totally do a series. I think because we have been talking about this and now that our schedules have finally caught up with each other, I think through like end of the year to like continue to digest, because all of us do follow strategy and we work on strategy all day, every day. And then we've been coming together to talk about it because we're like, oh my God, I need to talk about this with someone. I think if we can bring that into the public space so that the people who follow these series on YouTube can follow along and start to also pick up the way we talk about things and normalize it, I think that will really, really help, because we all know there aren't enough programs right now that are doing that for people. For some people there are communities where it's working, and then there are a lot where it's just really failing. So yeah. Okay.
This is fun.
Agreed.
Thanks, friends. As I'm saying that, you know how I pay attention to the environmental noises, and there's like alarms. There's sirens going up and down the street, and I'm like, clearly the answer is
Yeah.
yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being my friends in business.
Likewise. Thank you for hosting this conversation. I'm so excited to have it with you.
Yeah,
Yes,
this
I
is
hope it's
fun.
recorded right. Actually, like I'm actually a little bit excited.
Well, we'll find
So,
something's going to happen. We'll
Cool.
figure it out.
yeah. All right. So we will be back with a part 2. Everybody, hang on to the edge of your seat. Okay. See you later. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.